Welcome, everyone. We are very pleased to present our succession planning webinar. I'm Stephanie Larscheid, the Executive Director of Prairie Family Business Association, and we have a lot to talk about and cover related to succession planning with the Austad family. As we get started, I am very pleased to announce that this is the largest audience that we have ever had at a webinar for Prairie Family Business Association. We have 200 people joining us from all over. Succession planning is so important, whatever business, whatever generation, and it's hard. It's a lot of work. It takes time, it takes people, it takes energy. And so we thank you for giving of your time today to learn a few nuggets of information about succession planning that you can take back to your family and your business. We have been starting our year off with a succession planning webinar for the past 3 years. This is our third. Our first webinar 3 years ago was with someone who's really close to Prairie Family Business Association, and that was the Lloyd family sharing their succession story. And I do want to take a moment to share that Craig Lloyd, the patriarch of Lloyd Companies, has passed away. And he's been very instrumental to the success of our members within Prairie Family Business Association, always lending an ear, a hand. Anyone who wants to talk business, family, he's willing to talk about it. And I will say that the family is at peace with where the business is at today because of all the years of work that they have put into succession planning and transition planning. It is worth it. The family was able to be with Craig during his last moments and to just be a family. And that was really important. They knew the business was taken care of, so it's worth it. With that, I'd like to take a moment of silence for Craig Lloyd. Thank you. Today's topic is very important for so many reasons. So we're going to start off and see a video about the Austad family. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Oscar, and I'm here because I need this job. And I've been asked to tell you a little bit about our company, where we've been, where we're going, and some things that maybe you don't know. I was told by a lot of experts that people will never buy golf equipment by mail. Don't do it. Well, I'm no smarter than they were, but I did have the feeling that if you have the right product at the right time, at the right price, and build up an image that they know they can trust you, you can sell anything by mail. And as it turned out, things worked out pretty well. We went from sending out 25 or 30 postcards till today. We send out more than 30 million catalogs a year.
My father was an insurance claims adjuster, had no intention whatsoever of being in the golf business, and ultimately we became the largest in the world, and we had no idea that was going to happen.
Grandpa started the business in 1963, and they started from their kitchen table, which, what a fantastic American business story. Start at the kitchen table and then grow it into what it is today.
I think for anyone to have a lot of success, you have to have a good idea and you have to get a little lucky. And my grandfather, Oscar, had both.
One of the things that I think Austad's did was that we brought it to the masses and allowed people to be able to try the game and go out and play, and it lost some of its mystique of being just this rich man's sport. And I'm very proud of that. I think one of the legacies that Austad's has is that we were a big part of what made golf grow from 10 million golfers back in 1960 to 30 to 35 million now.
Golf is a perfect analogy for life. It's a perfect analogy for business because none of us in this world will go through life without adversity. And golf teaches you a lot about yourself and how you're going to handle that and move forward productively.
It's just a really wonderful, wonderful sport. You can play with friends, you can play competitively, or you can just go out and have a good time. And I'm so glad that we are in this business. I think we have a pretty good understanding of who we are, what we want to do, what we want to create in this world, and how we want to leave it a better place.
We're proud to have started the world's first golf catalog, but we are humbled to evolve into one of the most awarded club fitting operations in the country.
So the question arises, why did we succeed when all the experts said that you can't be done? Number one, we try to operate on the basis of the golden rule. honesty, loyalty, intelligence, and ambition. We want to treat our customers the way we would want to be treated if we were in their shoes.
We are a family business. We like to extend that feeling to our customers and to our employees and really try and make the experience special when they walk in our doors.
We're hopefully going to have a lot more good years than bad. But boy, you better be able to figure out how to be nimble, because we're not looking to get out of this. This is what we do. We're the Austad family. We've been in this since '63, and we'll be in it a long time to come.
Well, that kind of sets the stage for what we're talking about and how we're going to answer your questions related to succession planning. We have quite a bit to cover, and as you have questions, we'll open that up at the end for questions. So welcome, Dave and Ryan. Looking forward to talking succession with you.
I just realized that I'm wearing the same shirt that I had in the video. I just want you to know that Austad's has a lot of golf shirts. We have a tremendous selection, and I have more than one. I just want you to be aware of that. But I look really good in it, so I thought, hey, why not?
Go ahead and formally introduce yourselves.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. My name is Ryan Austad. I'm the president and COO of Austad's Golf, third generation that now gets the opportunity to help steer this ship. So, thanks for having me.
I'm Dave Austad. I am generation number 2. I was 3 years old when my dad started our business, and it is the only job that I ever had other than a paper route that I did well with. So I did not go outside the world. This was the only thing that I've ever done, and I've loved it, and it has been a passion and a joy, and I think I just celebrated my 50th anniversary at Austad's. And I believe Ryan bought me a $100,000 bar. Thank you. Thank you. To celebrate, he bought me a candy bar. It was a very touching, moving thing for me.
It was $100 grand, yeah.
$100 grand, yeah. And I ate it. It was great, so.
Well, it's the two of you in your business, and we have Generation 2, Generation 3. Dave, start us off by talking about the beginning of you taking over the business and kind of how that transpired going from your dad to you and your brother, and how the founding organization of Prairie Family Business Association was involved with that, which we were called the Sons of Bosses at that time.
Or the SOBs, however you want to use it, but we didn't usually use that term very often. But yeah, so I went to school at Augustana. I would take business classes and come to work. I was in charge of the marketing department when I was going to college. I ran the retail store when I was 18. This was my world. This is what I loved. This is what I have always wanted to do, except when I was in 3rd grade when they said I was going to be a singing cowboy comedian, and I decided that career probably wasn't going to do very well. So. But we had a group of people back in the late 80s, early 90s, men and women that were in their 20s and 30s, who were all trying to figure out how the transition, and there was also a lot of very successful businesses in the upper Midwest for guys in their 60s. And so we would meet on a regular basis, and first of all, it was the guys and gals just having a beer going, whose dad is worse, or whose mom is worse. I bet mine's worse, and we'd start talking about it. And it ultimately came together as a formal group, and we started the Family Business Association, and it was all volunteer. We had programs, we had things that came out, we had speakers every month, and I think it's one of the reasons that family business is so strong in the upper Midwest is there has always been that culture of sharing. There's always been that culture of, hey, if you've got an issue, this is how we handle it, what do you think? And in my case, it was instrumental for me to be able to go from Generation 1 to Generation 2. You saw a little bit of the history of Austad's. My father started the business when he was 41 years old. So he was a late bloomer, and he was great at passing stock on. In fact, I have 5 brothers and sisters. All of them had stock in the business. I had a brother who was active in the business. My brother and I didn't get along, and it was quite obvious fairly early that one of us was going to have to go. It did not work out very well, and we weren't sure what was happening. And it also, the issues was my father was suffering from Alzheimer's. He had diabetes and he had Parkinson's, so he was not in a position to play referee. So we didn't know exactly how to make this work, but it was a mess. It was incredibly stressful, and I'm sure many of you family businesses recognize some of this stuff. But my brother and I sat down long enough to agree that we would get some of our sons of bosses together. He would pick half, I would pick half, and they became kind of the first affinity peer group, and we would state our case, and we would both agree to whatever they decided on what was going to occur with the Austad business. And through that process, they determined that the best thing was for my brother to move on, and he did. He moved on to Colorado and started a human resources business there, and he's been there ever since. But I don't know what we would have done. I'm not sure we would be here today were it not that group of peers that sat down and listened to our issues and our problems, and my brother and I both agreeing that we will, whatever they decide, we will agree to this is what we'll do.
So a lot going on there at that time. A lot going on with family, a lot going on with business, emotions high. And as you acquired the company, Dave, you've shared that you were forced to take on an outside partner. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so every business goes through their ups and downs and all that. My down happened all at once, and it happened in 1994 to 1996. This is when my brother and I were duking it out. We were trying to figure out what we were going to do. The business was in a downspin. We were not making money. Our bank, believe it or not, said, we don't want to be your bank anymore, and you need to go find somebody else, and you need to find somebody quickly. And my father was dying, so I was taking care of his issues with where do we put him? Does he put him in memory care? How do I make sure that my mom is taken care of? And my sisters and brothers all were stockholders as well. So I made a chart. I found the chart the other day of my different options. I had 4 different options. The one I selected was I sold a majority of Austad's Golf. It was sold to a large conglomerate in New York. They were a large cataloger. I ended up owning 30%. All my family got bought out. My mom and dad got bought out. My brother got bought out. My brothers and sisters who were not active, they got bought out. And I thought, okay, now I'm going to work for this big company. It's going to be wonderful. We're going to go into the sunset. I'm going to learn all these wonderful things. And I remember distinctly sitting in my lawyer's office a few blocks away from here, and we had this room full of contracts all around. I mean, hundreds of contracts, and they had their own legal team. And my lovely wife, who was sitting in front here, had way more intuition than I did. Rule number 1, if you want to write these down, listen to your wife, okay? Because she went over to the lawyer, this big fancy New York lawyer, and she sat down and she said, all right, my husband's going to be a 30% owner. He's going to be a minority owner in his family business. How do we know we can trust you? How do we know that we can do that? And of course, he was Mr. Slick. He had the right answer, and he goes, oh, we love Dave. He's great. He's awesome. We're gonna have him forever. This is gonna work out awesome. There's no way we would do anything that would, jeopardize our relationship. Well, she left her meeting with him. She walked to me on the other side of the conference room. She said, don't sign it. He's lying to you. They will take you to the cleaners. And of course, I go, thank you, honey, appreciate that. That's lovely. But of course, I signed it. 4 months later, I get a phone call. They call me up. They said, hey, Dave, I know we told you that we're going to run things from Sioux Falls, but we changed our mind. We're going to move the distribution center to Pennsylvania. Customer service center is going to go to San Diego. And oh, by the way, you're going to tell your 600 employees that we're making a change and they're going to be out of a job, unless they'd like to move to Pennsylvania or San Diego, which they did not want to do. And so I went home and said, yep, you're right, you nailed it. And of course, I figured, I'm done. I'm not gonna be able to live in Sioux Falls anymore. I'm not gonna be able to go to the grocery store. I'm gonna have to tell all these employees that I thought, hey, I saved your jobs, and then it didn't work out. It was the lowest time. And just to make the impact, they started moving all the inventory out of our East 10th and Sycamore. If you ever go to Sioux Falls on the east side, you look at that large building. That was the original Austad, 140,000 square feet, where we processed hundreds of thousands of orders of golf equipment all over the world. It is now owned by somebody else. But anyway, that was a very tough situation for me and for our family. And I said, I'm not going to be your partner anymore. We're going to split. I took the retail stores. They took the catalog, which is what they were interested in. And as things happened to progress, 3 years later, they sold it. They went to an internet company. It went bankrupt, the company that bought Austad's. So I didn't own my own name. And I didn't own the catalog, and I ended up having to go to Baltimore, Maryland in a bankruptcy court, and my biggest competitor, who had hired many of my employees, was in the other room, and I was bidding against the other employer for my name. And we went 17 rounds. I got it on the 17th round. I got the catalog and the name and the property back here in Sioux Falls, and started up again. So that was a 4-year odyssey back in the early 2000s. And I learned a lot about the good parts and the bad parts of how to pass on generations and be very weary of New York attorneys. You can jot that one down too if you want, but that was a very interesting, very difficult situation. And the day the last truck left our warehouse at East 10th and Sycamore, my father passed away, the very day. So there you go.
Family business is hard.
It can be hard, yes, absolutely.
And I think there's not a lot of people that would realize that piece of your story, Dave, and the Austad story when you see it or you're a customer. And family business is hard, selling is hard, arguing with family is hard, and fighting to get that business back. All of these things transpired to here we are today. Years later, we have the third generation in the business. And so, Ryan, you took a different path after college, and you worked outside the business. So talk about that, and then ultimately coming back.
Yeah, well, I grew up in the business, right? So I worked in the stores, I worked in the warehouse, and so I had that foundation set. I loved the company, I loved golf, and so I always had a passion for what we do. But I moved down to Lincoln, Nebraska. I went to the University of Nebraska. I went to grad school down there, and I don't ever remember an explicit conversation of, it certainly was not an expectation that I would come back to the family business. I don't even remember that conversation happening until I was almost 30 years old. And so when I finished grad school, I wanted to go do something else. I wanted to go see what I could accomplish, see what I could achieve, and I was fortunate to get a job with the Gallup organization in Omaha. Spent a couple years there, and then I moved up to Minneapolis and with Gallup, working as a management consultant, and it was the best training, the best education I could receive. So my job was to go into Fortune 1000 organizations, listen to their opportunities, listen to their problems, and then try to find creative ways to solve them. And in hindsight, that was the best thing I could do because, I think it was 2014, you called me up. I was driving to work in Minneapolis and said something like, hey, I kind of need to do some planning. Stephanie's bothering me to get this succession plan going.
I think you called me, honestly, but it's really not details.
It's the details. So, he just said, would you ever have an interest in coming back? And things were going well for me and my family, my wife, Amberly, and we had one child at that time. And we thought about it, and I was interested. So that was the first question: is do you have an interest? And I was, and then you kind of fill in the gaps of, okay, where are your talents? Where could you fit in? How does this all work? But for us, had a ton of pride in what my grandfather, father, the whole Austad's team, many of the people at Austad's I've known since I was an infant. They still work there. We've got employees that have been there 30, 40, 50 years. It's pretty amazing. So very proud of what they accomplished, wanted to contribute to that. We were growing our own family, so I was excited to come back to Sioux Falls and raise my family here and also have free babysitting in the form of grandparents. But I also felt like I had something to contribute, right? Like I had gotten my education, but I had gone out, I had proved myself in the world. I had some value that I could add so that this wasn't a nepotism hire where you're coming in and you're just filling a seat. It's you're coming in and thankfully you were, I would say, willing and maybe excited to delegate a lot of responsibility and leadership, which I'm thankful for. I know that doesn't always happen in a family business, but I was able to step in, and I've been back in the business now. This is my 11th season back, so it's been a lot of fun.
When you talk about coming back, switching careers, essentially, there were some sacrifices that you made along the way, but also some expectations about investing in the next 20, 50, 100 years of Austed's. Talk about some of those sacrifices that you made coming back and why you made them.
Well, I think you have to have a very nuanced view of transitioning stock and ownership, and you have to look at your entire, compensation package and all of those things. And you have to be very upfront with what the goals are with the current generation of ownership and the incoming generation of ownership. And so we had a lot of those frank and sometimes difficult discussions. And, I'm of the belief, and I think you would agree with this, I'm sure you'll tell me if you don't, but I'm of the belief that if you're going to own a company, you need to have skin in the game. And so that was one thing we instituted right away is I wrote what at the time for me was an uncomfortable check for shares in the business. I also, the small amount of shares my sisters had, we had conversations with them and I bought them out as well. So I had some pretty significant skin in the game right out of the gate, which I think is really important. I think that's a necessity. I also knew that at least in year one, I probably would not be compensated the way I was being compensated as a consultant in Minneapolis. But I have an entrepreneurial mindset, and I realized all of that stuff is going to work itself out. What I make on day one and maybe the delta between that and my market rate, we can have discussions around gifting of stock, things of that nature. And if I'm adding value to the business, all of that's going to come back, whether it's in the form of distributions, whether it's in the form of additional compensation down the road. That part did not concern me. So there was a little bit of maybe pain on the front end, knowing that we were going to be able to build something, and all of that was going to come back in spades later on, which it has. And I would say, and you can certainly speak to this, but maybe on the flip side, I recognized you had other options. I always tell family businesses this. The current generation, they can pad their pockets and they could sell today, they could do an ESOP, they can transition to anyone they want. He had other options. It didn't have to be me. And he recognized that I did not need the family business to be successful. And so when we both had that perspective, we both approached this with a sense of gratefulness and understanding and peace with where we were going, where you can see if you don't have one of those perspectives, you're going to resent me, I'm going to resent you, you're not going to delegate authority. All of these things can, at best, impact the business in a poor way, and at worst, impact your family. So now you're screwing up Thanksgiving and Christmas in addition to your bottom line. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And we both gave up something, and I think that helps when we both have sacrifice on the line. My wife and I could have sold the business early on. We could have just gotten a check and walked into the sunset and said, let's go lay on the beach in Florida. We really didn't want to do that. That wasn't a real key for us. And Ryan gave up a very lucrative career that he could have had up in Minneapolis, and he took a cut in pay, at least initially, to come in and be a part of the business. And now we recognize, and we continue to have these, both of us, in Ryan's case, any income that we make, he wants to keep in the business because he wants to open more stores. Any income we make, I would like to put in my pocket, and I would like to. So those conversations continue to go on. If you don't have that on a regular basis, and my guess is virtually every family business here is nodding their head going, yep, we've had those conversations. And candidly, I'll make one other point, and this is something that every family business, every owner has to decide for themselves, but the $100,000 question is who owns stock? I have 4 children. And Ryan is the only one that owns shares other than my wife and I. And part of that was because of what I went through back with going through Gen 1 to Gen 2, but I wanted to make sure the person who is ultimately responsible for the business is ultimately owning the shares. Now, it might come down, I have a daughter who is in charge of all of our internet and our marketing. Sarah, she lives in Omaha, she's amazing. And she too got a job outside the business before she came with us. She worked for a very good internet company, so she came with some very good things. But she's not running the business, but she does not own stock. And I said, would you prefer to own stock, or would you prefer for Mom and I to figure out some other ways where we might be able to compensate you and take care of things? And I also said, from my perspective, it makes sense for the CEO to be the person that owns the shares. It makes it cleaner, it makes it simpler. Now, that's not true in every business. Everybody makes their own decisions, but that's what we came up with.
I do think one of the big disservices a lot of business owners make is not accurately describing what it means to own shares in a business. They might describe it, this is what it means today, this is what it's meant in the best of times. But I can understand the appeal. If there's an individual that says, I need to know my salary is this, I need to know my increases every year are likely that to keep up with or outpace inflation. I need to know the profit share is this, and that's how I'm at peace. That's how I'm comfortable. That's fair. I understand that appeal. That same person probably is not going to thrive in an environment where they're signing a personal guarantee. I came back into significant ownership when I was 30 years old. I'm 40 now. 30 years old, I'll be doing this for 3.5 decades, hopefully, plus, right? Do the math on how many economic downturns, how many macroeconomic downturns I will get to. I'll have the privilege of leading our company through. And so I need to be comfortable making those calls. And it's oftentimes that means, when COVID first hit, I went into his office and I said, we need to cut both of our salaries to zero. That's the first thing we need to do, just make sure we can keep paying everybody else. And so I think it's important that any incoming generation, they can have a leadership position, but they might not want that. That is not meant for everybody, and that's not good or bad. It's just, it is what it is. But you got to paint that picture accurately, because the last thing you want is somebody owning a portion of the business that is not comfortable making those calls and making those sacrifices when you're called to do so.
Really thoughtful perspectives on transition and business ownership, Ryan and Dave. So thank you for sharing that. I had a conversation with an advisor just yesterday that said there are certain character traits that will make a family business transition successful. He and I said we need to do a little digging into that, but it's very true that there's some give and take, there's some sacrifice, and there's being uncomfortable with the conflict conversations and having that healthy back and forth, that it's not always going to be rosy, that we need to talk about the hard stuff. Now, Ryan, you have sisters, and so you are the only one in ownership, and you work with your siblings. Talk about that relationship.
So I have 3 sisters. My older sister is the one that's involved in the business. She runs our e-com and our marketing. She is infinitely smarter than I am, and so she has a key leadership position within our company, and it really, in many respects, is kind of my right hand. When I have ideas, good or bad, she'll be the first one to tell me that most of them are bad, and then we put those aside and we focus on the good ones.
I'll be right after her, right there.
I don't even share them with you anymore.
Thanks.
Yeah, so, and that's been a wonder. We actually came back into the business at about the same time. It was late 2014, and it's been a wonderful working dynamic for us. I think it helps that we have clarity of not only our roles, but our goals and what we want. I think it also helps that we have a lot of transparency. Maybe to your point earlier, if she didn't want to buy in, to have skin in the game, or didn't want to have the added stress of personal guarantees and things of that nature, Mom and Dad are having separate conversations with her around how do we make things fair for her. If Ryan is buying and then being gifted some shares, there's value in that. How do we make things fair for Sarah, being a part of the business, and how do we make things fair for my other 2 siblings? So I don't like giving you a lot of credit because your head is big enough as it is, but you guys probably have done a really good job having open dialogue with all 3 of the girls, so that they feel like they're not getting the short end of any stick, and that they're being well communicated with, and they understand how things are fair between the 4 of us. Not equal, but fair.
And I think we've had the conversation, it's my perspective that the CEO should have the stock. I've also told you, and it's going to be your call, but there may be somewhere down the road where you and Sarah are talking, and you may end up selling or gifting some shares to Sarah, but that would be your call.
And it's we started the conversation 10, 11 years ago. We probably broached the subject every 1 to 2 years. It changes. People's mindset changes, so you don't have the conversation once and leave it. It's like your buy-sell agreement, right? You're constantly reevaluating, does this still make sense for where our family is today?
And people do not like to talk about this stuff. I mean, my wife and I are updating our will about every other year, and so we she does the email out. She says, we're doing our will. If there's anything that you guys want out of the house, let us know. So instantly we get 4 emails and phone calls going, all right, what's going on? Is there something wrong? Is there something going down? All right, what's happening? And as soon as they know that's going, it's go, well, I'll take the dishes. That'll be great. And then put my name on this stuff over there. They don't really do that. But it is something that they are always going, why are you always talking about death? And we're like, no, we're not really doing that, but we want to be prepared, because the thing, and I feel my biggest responsibility right now, Ryan's running the day-to-day part of the business. He's doing way better than I was ever. And so my biggest job is, how do I hand this off where, Craig Lloyd was a mentor of mine and an incredible example. We can celebrate his life. We can celebrate his incredible, and you don't have to worry about a fight amongst the family members of what's going on. I want to make sure that happens with Austad's as well, and that's why we have the tough conversations on a regular basis.
If you have them frequently, they become less tough, by the way. They're tough when you never broach the subject. If it's been 10 years and you haven't brought this up, that's probably going to be tough. If you bring up death every 3 weeks at the dinner table, it's pretty normal at the Austad house.
And, speaking of that, you had a pretty serious health scare a couple of years ago, Dave, and I know that your family was able to care for you and be with you because a lot of the plans of the business were in place and had been communicated, and everyone felt really comfortable about that, including the buy-sell agreement and how the stock would be bought out. Talk about that experience.
Yeah, well, first of all, I considered myself as a typical person that owns the business, that I will live to infinity and I will have no issues and all that. And I was out mowing the lawn a couple of years ago and found that I had to stop about every 15 minutes. I have a push mower and a big lawn. I had to stop and I had to catch my breath. And I came in and I told my wife, and she said, go in, and I ignored her. And then about 2 months, 3 months later, I kept saying, it's not getting good. And she said, go in, and I ignored her. And then I went back in about 3 months later, and I finally got a cardiologist to look at it, and he did a echocardiogram or whatever they do with the fluid going through the veins, and I'm totally conscious, and I'm watching this fluid going across, and it goes through the widowmaker, which is a fairly important artery, apparently, for your long-term health, and I'm watching it cruise along and then stop. And I pointed to the cardiologist, I go, shouldn't that thing keep moving? Shouldn't the blood keep moving? He goes, yeah, you have 99% blockage in your widowmaker, and you have 2 choices. You can walk out of here, and you will die within the next 30 days, guaranteed. There will be no ambulance, there will be no other issues, or we will bring you in today and we will do a bypass, and we will fix this and hopefully get you back on track. And I chose option B. I thought that was a better option out of the 2, and I'm feeling great. I feel really good, but when I was all done, the cardiologist came in and he stuck his finger in my face and he said, you are a very lucky man. You should not be here. And I knew I was a lucky man, but when you kind of look at death in the face like that, it does definitely give you a better perspective. And I would say that my perspective is considerably more enjoying every day that I have. I never know if I'm going to have another one. Every day is a blessing. Yesterday I came to work for a couple of hours. Then I went out and picked up my grandson, and we went and played football in our backyard. And I thought, that's a pretty cool way of spending an afternoon. I like that. That was pretty cool. But it also helped me ensure that I'm going to continue to keep communicating and talking with my family. We do family trips every year. We're going to do one coming up here in a couple of months, all 17 of us. We have 9 grandkids, and we rent a house on the beach, and we do a business meeting, and we talk, and about 10% of it is business, 90% is fun and games, and and that has really helped it as well in ensuring that our family stays together.
Friends at Ide Bailey are here. 100% of that trip is business.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, whoops. Okay.
For the public record.
Public record, yes. It's 100% business, all the way through. Yep. Whoops.
So during that time, the business was in good shape because you'd put your plans in place. You knew that if you had a hit by the bus plan, you knew if something happened to Dave or Denise tomorrow, there was a plan for the business. So talk about that confidence.
Well, bad things are going to happen to everybody in this room. I'm sorry to break that news. The bad things are going to happen to me, and you can't necessarily plan for that, but you can plan for everything else around it. And I'll give you a golf analogy, and you know, we always tell our kids it's okay to make a mistake, but you make one mistake at a time. Don't compound it with two. The golf analogy is, and I see a Menke here, right? So if you hit a bad drive, if you spray it to the right, get yourself back in play. Don't try to hit the hero shot to try to get to the green. You're going to end up taking a triple bogey. Well, the analogy here would be, hey, we know at some point something's going to happen to one of us, right? All the things you can do to plan around that bad thing can alleviate the stress, not all the stress, but at least in that moment, I was able to go to the hospital with my mother, and we walked the grounds while you were in surgery, and we could be present with family. I wasn't on the phone trying to figure out, okay, if this surgery goes poorly, what exactly happens with ownership, leadership responsibilities, what insurance policies do we or don't we have in place. All of that's already buttoned up. So the analogy is, you might get a bad break being a heart surgery, bad break being you sliced one into the woods, but we don't compound that mistake. We're prepared then to pitch it back to the fairway, give yourself a shot at par, at worst bogey, and let's move forward.
You know, I just make one more point. One of the other things that occurred through my heart surgery is my perspective on the business and the family. And first of all, and this may help some other family businesses, I don't perceive that Austad's owns the company, Austad's Golf, anymore. We're caretakers. We're responsible to take care of this business and to move it forward. We'll do the best we can. We will hopefully make it profitable for our employees. We'll get the best service we can for our customers. But we are caretakers. God provided us this incredible opportunity. My father, who was not a great golfer, happened to fall into this, and we're blessed every day that he came into a business that's a lot of fun. Every one of our customers comes in, and it's usually a really positive experience because they're coming in to buy a new driver or buy a new wedge or whatever it is. It is a great business to be in. And so and I tell that to my employees. Hey, look guys, we sell sticks that hit little balls in the hole, okay? It's not rocket science. Let's enjoy it. Let's have some fun. Let's make sure our customers enjoy it as well and have a good time. And then I also, to my family, and we've had, my wife and I put together our own charity, our 501c3, the Austad Golf Foundation, and we take a good part of our profits, and as we get older, a lot of whatever money we have, we're going to put in there, and we look for ways that we can give back, because we feel, again, we're caretakers. There are a lot of people that do not have the opportunities that we have, and I have told my kids, and I've told my grandkids this, we're all on this earth for a very short time. And there's going to be someday you're going to go meet God, and you're going to look at him, and God's going to say, here's what I gave you. What did you do with it? And hopefully you have a good answer for that. If you say, well, I put it in a slot machine, and I was really hoping I'd hit big, may not be the greatest answer. So I look at that every day and say, I have been blessed with a lot of resources, and I hope my family sees the same way. How can we make sure that we're giving back to people out there that are less fortunate than we are?
And that's been a really impactful way that you've been able to engage your generation and second generation, the third generation, but yet the fourth generation is involved in those philanthropic efforts. Talk about that.
Well, if open invite to anybody who wants to play in the Austad's Invitational this year. But if you come to the Austad Invitational this year, you will see basically all of the 9 grandkids, at least the ones that can walk, will be helping you get your clubs to your cart and helping you get your lunch and my daughter Hannah usually does an announcement to start the tournament. So they're very involved because they know we're raising money for great causes. This last year was Golf for Africa and the First Tee. The other thing that's cool though, like my kids, I have 3 kids. They're just about 12, 8, and 4. And every year, not only do we volunteer somewhere, but there's a certain amount of money that can come out of the foundation and can go to a charity or a cause that they choose. So they bring them to the dinner table, we talk about them, and then they vote. And this year, the one that they chose was in Brandon. It's a coffee shop that has, or a smoothie shop that allows folks that have some disabilities to work there. And my kids have a personal connection to some of the people that work at this facility, and they were able to go and present the check, which was really meaningful for them. And candidly, it was probably more meaningful for my kids than it was for the charity. But it's hopefully instilling in them a service for community and giving back and being responsible with the gifts that they are given.
We talk often, or we get questions often from family businesses that say, how do we engage the younger generation, the kids? How do we involve them in the business? And what we talk about is a lot of value-based discussion. This is why we're in business. This is how we do good with the business. This is how we treat our employees. This is how we give back. And that's a great example of a way that you can make impact and demonstrate what the business can do for those children who are younger. Now, I know affinity peer groups have been a big piece of both of your lives over the years. It's really great to talk and reflect about how Austad's has been a part of Prairie Family Business for all of our history, which is 33 years. And for a good chunk of that, you've been involved in your peer group. So if you can even talk, each of you, about what your peer group has meant to you.
I've had a peer group, and Tish is here. Tish is part of my peer group. We've been 8 years plus. And, you know, there's this misnomer that business is filled with rational minds, rational decisions, rational people. And the reality is business, whether it's a family business or not, is incredibly emotional. Making hiring decisions, development decisions, performance reviews, compensation conversations, letting somebody go, all of it is fraught with emotion. And when you add an element of family to that, you have an added layer of complexity that not everybody understands, but our peer group does, right? That, like I said earlier, it could impact your day-to-day work environment, but it could also impact when you go home that night and talk with your spouse. It could impact your Thanksgiving and your holiday plans if those situations aren't handled right. So there's a ton of value in the peer group, but I think the biggest thing for me is you have a group of individuals that understand that emotion. At best, they can offer insight, resources, best practices, ideas, experiences, and at worst, which is still incredibly helpful, they can just be an ear to listen and say, that's really hard, I understand, that must be difficult, you'll get through it, you know, I believe in you, and then they can check in on you. So that's where I think I've gotten the most value over 8+ years, is just having individuals who understand the emotion of family businesses, in addition to all the other, you know, best practice guidance, resource sharing, all of those types of things.
I would concur with that. Just to make sure everybody understands, Ryan's in a group of people that are coming into and taking over the business. I'm in a group of people that are responsible to pass it on. So all of us are in our 60s and 70s. And I've been in our group for 8 years. Our moderator, Sandra's here. And it started out, honestly, it took a while. It took a little while for us to be able to share and to be able to kind of let our hair down on what's going on and what our issues are. I can honestly say now it's one of the most productive things that we do. We have 4 meetings a year, and I think the thing that makes it so powerful is we keep each other accountable. We go around the room, and every one of us has to say, what are we going to do before our next meeting? And all of us recognize, being the generation that's going to pass it on, how do we pass that business on with the least amount of turmoil? How do we communicate to the people that we love the most? How do we make the decisions, the tough decisions that we've been avoiding, that we've been had on the back burner forever because we don't want to do it? And the entire group says, you do not come back next time and say that's still on the list. That better be off the list, or we are going to let you have it. And it has been incredibly powerful for, I think, all of us. I think there's 7 or 8 of us in the group, and Pat Lloyd was one of our best persons in there, and we learned so much from Pat and what the Lloyd family has done. But it is amazing, and it keeps you accountable for what you have to do, and it makes sure that you do the tough decisions, because that's the kind of stuff that we all like, I'll have time for that. I'll call the attorney and do the buy-sell agreement. Why would I want to talk about what happens if there's a divorce, or if there's if Ryan dies? Why would I want to talk about that? Well, you don't, but it's really handy that you do it now before something like that might happen. Because as Ryan said, things happen all the time. We just never know. And so the peer groups, I would give a hearty endorsement to.
I know the peer group experience has been valuable for you, and you've been valuable to your peer group mates, and just having that community where it's a safe space to talk about the confidential issues of business, family, and self is so powerful. And so we are grateful that you've taken great advantage of that and been good contributors to your peer group mates. We have a few questions that are coming in, and so those of you who are on Zoom, go ahead and type those in the chat, and our team will get those questions to me. And those of you in the room, we'll put up a number you're welcome to text your questions into. Our first question is, can you describe a little bit more about the fair versus equal? And this is probably directed to you, Dave, the question more so. When you talk about your children and 1 being in ownership and 3 not being in ownership, describe more about how you're making it fair.
Yeah, everybody has to define that differently. And I've talked to family businesses where they say, I have 4 children, so each one of them is going to get 25%, and because that's fair and that's equal, so that's the way it works. I don't see it that way because not every person in that family is giving the same amount, and some of them may not even be in the business. So you end up having a person who is not putting their neck on the line and going there day to day. And part of this is through my first generation that I went through, because at one point we had 14 shareholders that my dad was dishing it out to grandkids. I think the family dog had stock. I mean, it was crazy. And most of them had nothing to do with the business. And then I took over, and all they wanted to do was, where's my check? Where's my check? Where's my check? And they're not involved in any of the issues or the problems or whatever. So it's my job to say, first of all, what is the best for the business? What is the best to ensure that the business is going to be successful and continue to go forward? And then, what are some different things that we can do that will help make it fair? And by fair, it might be people that do not have shares. We might, my wife and I may give them a gift during the year. We might take a trip with them. We might do something else that is not necessarily stock in the business, but it's another way to be able to say, hey, you're an Austad, we're doing well, we're blessed, here's a way for us to be able to help you out. And in many cases, they actually appreciate that more than having stock and having to fill out, personal guarantees and all of their fun stuff.
On that note, there's a lot of ways that you can go about it. We hear from families that it can be very effective when you have those one-on-one conversations with each child before you come together as a big group, or before you have the family meeting, and kind of have that meeting before the meeting with your children. I imagine that's what you're doing. Do you include spouses in those meetings as well?
I would, actually, and I do, because I think the spouse, if you don't, and come back, I don't know how well it's translated to them on exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we try, like when we have our family meeting, when we have our trip coming up here in a couple months, all 17, some of the little kids won't be around, but we want the in-laws there. We want them there because we want them to know exactly what's going on. And if they have a question, they can certainly ask and know what's happening.
Talk about some of the mechanisms that you're using or have used to fund the transition. One of the biggest obstacles that we hear from family business owners time and time again is, my business has become too successful. The next generation can't afford it. I don't know how we can ever make this work. Talk about how you're making it work.
So when we made the determination, Ryan came back and we wanted to get some stock into his hands. He bought some shares. We wanted to make sure that, as Ryan said, we had some skin in the game. That was great. We then made a fairly substantial gift. We used some of our lifetime exemption to give him some additional stock so that he has some more. So there is that. And then when we put it together, we said, if possible, if there are people that are interested, number one, we want to keep the business in the family. So that's number one. Number two, we want to develop a system or a plan where who is running the business is not battered down with so much debt, because I went through that and I've had several banks tell me, hey, Dave, you need to go find something else. Not fun. Not fun. So again, hopefully my role is, let's try to keep this successful and make it work. So we did not want to have a situation where they're taking out a big loan. They're giving us money that frankly we may or may not really need at this point anyway. So let's keep the debt to a minimum, and then let's let them give the power to be able to make it work, and let's communicate. Make sure everybody in the family knows what we're doing. So. As I said earlier, we both have kind of given something up by being in the business. He took a pay cut initially. We probably took a little cut in the fact that we could have gone out earlier. I had people that were willing to go buy the company. My dad had that same opportunity. Back when the business was really humming for the catalog, my dad had some people that were big, heavy hitters, and he came to me and he said, hey, I can sell this business, but if you want to be in it, I won't, and I will give you an opportunity to be a part of it. And that made such an impact for me that I wanted to make sure that that is carried on to you. You'll probably, get all the stock and then sell it immediately and then go live on a beach. So, who knows, but there you go.
Won't be your call.
Joking.
Yeah,
Won't be your call. The other thing, sort of to that point, though, is again, strange conversations to have. But death is another mechanism by which you can not only transfer shares and do so somewhat efficiently, but that also means that to your point earlier, you're involved from a strategic standpoint. You're running our foundation. You're not involved day to day from an operational standpoint, but because you've retained a good chunk of ownership, we're still able to distribute a good amount of cash to that generation of ownership, provided we keep doing well, right? So rather than selling for a big chunk 10, 15 years ago or whatever it might be, or even now, nobody's expecting you to jump into the staff meetings for 50 hours a week, but we can still funnel some cash that way. And so, death is a way that you can maintain ownership for a period of time, continue to compensate them for what's fair over the lifetime of work in the company that you built, and then efficiently transfer some of those shares or all of those shares.
It's really fun to talk about death. It's fun. It's great. But he's correct. And again, we understand that Ryan, when he came back, he brought some and my daughter Sarah as well, they brought things to the business that are benefiting us. They are allowing us to be more profitable. They are allowing us to be successful. And so we are still shareholders, so we take distributions, and it allows us to have a more relaxed time in our age where we can travel and we can do things with our family and do some other things that would probably not be able to be done otherwise. So it's looking at that perspective and saying, hey, we both have got skin in the game. We both have benefits here.
We have quite a few questions coming in, so we'll go through these as quickly as we can. What types of stock do you have, voting versus common?
It's all common. It's all the same. There's no vote. There's no A or B or anything like that.
And a board?
We have not put together a board. We've talked about it. That is a possibility. I think that's something that Ryan would need to kind of look at going forward.
That's right. Yeah. No, we don't currently have a board.
Board school's coming up on April 29th.
I heard that.
Yeah,
There we go.
There we go,
Stephanie. We do all your programs.
I know.
Yeah.
You're great members, 33 years strong. Thinking back to that time of hardship in the 90s, this person anticipates it may have been a difficult decision for you and your brother to allow some of those long-term decisions to be in the hands of others. Any specific conversations that played a key role in getting comfortable with that agreed-upon process?
It was in the 90s. There was I made a chart. I mentioned that it was kind of at a point where there was not a lot of options. I mean, my father was dying. My mother needed some resources for her shares. So there wasn't a whole lot of options on where we were going. And I should point out as well that as difficult as the time that I had with my brother, we've now both had time to reflect after that time. We get along great now. We go play golf when I'm in Colorado or when he's back here. Usually I beat him, but it's, that's irrelevant. That's really not that big a deal. But we get along fine. I mean, we've recognized during that time, as Ryan said earlier, family business, one of the things that makes it so hard is you've got so much emotion. You have so much baggage that comes with these decisions. And now when you have time to reflect and you can look back, you can see that maybe I would have handled things a little differently had I not had all that emotions tied into it. So.
And that answers one of our questions, what the relationship's like with your siblings, Dave, and then in relationship with you and your siblings, Ryan, with some working in the business, some in ownership, some in not. If you can talk about that relationship.
We're very blessed. I know this isn't always the circumstance with families and family businesses, but our family is incredibly close. I'm very close with all three of my sisters. My older sister, who's a part of our business, we talk every single day. I have two younger sisters here in Sioux Falls. We get together, probably go to church together on Sundays, and so we're very fortunate. If we have conflict, we work through it, and we also have very short memories, so we don't hold on to that. I don't think that's healthy for anybody. So we'll let it go pretty quickly. So no, I'm fortunate. I wish I had more to complain about, but I can complain about him. I can't complain a lot about my sisters.
It is really cool to see, and again, we have 9 grandchildren, and if you saw them all running around, you wouldn't know who belonged to who, because they all get along very well together as well. So Generation 4 is looking pretty good as well. I have 5 brothers and sisters. I mentioned that. I do get along fine with my brother. I also get along fine with my sisters and my other brother, and we get together at holidays. We have nice conversations. 5 of them live in Sioux Falls. 4 of them live in Sioux Falls in addition to me, and so we get along and do things on a regular basis. So we've been very blessed. I know that is not the case in every situation.
Yeah, and family harmony is one of the top predictors of success in a family business, and that really hits home in your case with the Austad family. When you get together and have a family retreat, or you go off together as a family and you have a business meeting, is everyone involved in that business meeting portion, or just the ownership?
We do have a meeting. The ownership is sitting here and my wife, so that's a pretty small meeting. Everyone gets involved in having a family meeting. We're kind of just starting this, and I'm doing a lot of reading. I know there's some great books out there as well. And you've had some great speakers over the years on family meetings, and we have a lot of young grandkids that we're going to start having them maybe go off and do some activities with maybe we'll bring in an outside person to talk to them about what we're doing with philanthropy and all those things. Everybody else sits in the meeting, and we talk about, in general, how the business is going, but otherwise we talk about our tournament, we talk about philanthropy. Ryan mentioned our charity last year was Golf for Africa, and so we had 4 of the family members actually go to Zambia, and we dedicated 3 wells in Zambia. We had a couple thousand villagers there celebrating the fact that they now have fresh water for the first time ever, and it was incredibly impactful. It was 2 of my daughters who are not in the business that came with us on that trip, and it was amazing. It was very cool.
I think if you can include everybody, it builds trust, right? If you're excluding spouses or whatever, you're gonna have some issues down the road. Yeah, I think you can give people, you want people to feel ownership over the company whether they have shares or not when they're in the family, right? So that's a great way that everybody can feel ownership. My younger sister Melissa talks about this all the time, that she's so proud of the Austad company. She feels ownership in the company, and she doesn't have a single share. And that's the goal. She doesn't want a single share. She wants to feel like she's proud and she has ownership over the company. So including her in those meetings and her spouse is, I think, the right call.
Thank you so much, Dave and Ryan. This has been very informative, and I know that there are nuggets that our family members listening can take away, and that is our goal. Our goal is that you can take one small step, one conversation, one action from today's conversation with the Austad family. Thank you for giving of your time and your expertise. We're very grateful. In closing, we at Prairie Family Business will announce that our big annual event is our conference, which is happening on April 30th and May 1st. We're expanding it to an audience of 500 people. Typically at this time of year, we're sold out for our annual conference, so we're really excited to welcome 200 more people than we usually do. We have 300 people registered. We look forward to bringing you together to learn from each other, to create community among our family business owners, and to take some action forward so we can help your family businesses thrive through generations. Thank you so much for today. Our team will be following up with messaging, including a recording from today's conversation, and we're here to answer your questions and help with your family business needs. Thank you.